promoted another concert a couple weeks ago in the greater Los Angeles area at Permanent Records Roadhouse with my brothers in house band. And after the set break of set one, I amble back into the club, and this cat gets up on bass in between two of my favorite musicians, Jason Abraham Roberts and Josh Adams, and just calmly swings through the groove as if nothing really mattered. And come to find out, then it's a guy who I've looked up to for a long time. One of the first bands that I really got hooked on in college was the Greyboy Allstars. And my next guest just has continued to plow through the musical lineage of our history, incorporating stuff from the masters before him, and then putting his own accent and essence on it, creating a really huge discography, not just with Greyboy, but as a leader in his own right on many different kinds of soundtracks. Mike Andrews, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks for having me, Jake. Appreciate it.
I didn't expect to lead in with this, but the news just broke, and I was kind of feeling queasy all day, and I didn't know why. And now I know Master Roy Haynes has left the planet. And not that you were swinging to Roy Haynes, or I just, when you think back early on in your musical career, when you were, still wet behind the ears, and the names like Max Roach and Roy Haynes and Jimmy Cobb and Tony Williams and Pete LaRocca and those kinds of cats, when did they enter your sort of bandwidth, and what makes them masters?
Oh, well, gosh, that's a big question. Um, uh,
Or just take Roy Haynes. I mean, what's the free association for you?
well, honestly, I come from a sort of an odd place into jazz, I think. Maybe different than anyone else that I play with, just because I come to it mostly from like an intuitive space. Um,
I
Not
did.
so much of a studied space. I'm sort of the for lack of a better way to look at it, I'm kind of the punk rock guy in the mix of it, or like the folk guy that entered the jazz scene. Um, it's like I have my drummers that I love. Roy Haynes obviously has an insane discography and is whatever part of the formation of how most of us approach jazz, whether we understand that or not, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so I think it's like maybe his influence not is not directly on me, but through the people that listen to him that I listen to. It's kind of like I kind of came in to this closer into the soul jazz realm. I'm very much of a, dare I say, I'm a backbeat kind of person. Um, and swinging is great, but I also love straight, right? I love Grady Tate and Idris Muhammad and
Come on, dude. Well, no, let me just stop you there because it's all good. I love the kind of cat that you are is the kind of cat that I love. I'm just curious though. Couple questions here. Like you come at it from a folk aesthetic or a punk rock aesthetic. You know, Same can be said for the Grateful Dead when they were having Charles Lloyd sit in with them at the
oh, of
Fillmore
course, yeah, Charles
West.
Lloyd's incredible. Yeah, of course.
And like my question, so a lot of those cats, like, Jerry Garcia couldn't play like jazz guitar. Merle Saunders like would help him sort of levitate into that sort of zone. Ron Tutt was at a certain point playing with Garcia. Barry Melton, Country Joe and the Fish. These guys all were folk musicians who aspired to
Yeah.
play jazz. But I'm just curious about, do you
I
feel like
guess
you're
I would probably fall into that category closer than like, I'm a self-taught musician. Um, I only studied music on my own or in the context of people that I play with. I've gotten to play with some great people and hopefully they've rubbed off a little bit on me and I've learned, but I've tried to always follow my own path, absorb as much as I can, but never try to be so obsessed with any one person or any one style that it limited where I was trying to get to intuitively, you know?
Absolutely. No, what I was trying to get at is like, you say soul jazz, Greyboy Allstars. What, like in your mind, um, I just wonder what you like. I love the street scholar approach. I think that's probably the coolest way to go. And guys I've interviewed like Schofield and Caliuta and
Mhm.
I mean Abercrombie. I mean a lot of these guys didn't even
Yeah,
graduate the academy. So I just
sure.
wonder like um in general though, the drummers that you dig on that you use,
Hmm.
what is it about their time feel that you get off on? I mean, because you are completely self-taught and I'm not a
Yeah.
musician,
I mean,
but
I love syncopation. And I don't, God, it's so hard to describe. You know, if I was a more musically like notation type person, I could express it to you or explain it to you. Anybody who has played with me knows very well what I like, you know, but it's very hard to explain, you know. I mean, that's the thing that makes music so special, is that you know, it's a you bring a personality into a situation, right? And the way someone rubs against you in a conversation, a musical conversation, the way that they syncopate with you, the way that you find rhythms together, that is what's special. So like could I tell you like what feel I like or whatever? I mean, that's it's such a it's kind of like saying what are my favorite words, you know? It's like I wouldn't be able to express
I
like
respect. No, I
what my
completely
favorite
understand.
feel is. And also if anything, I think it's about the sort of like contradiction or conflict of feel that makes music interesting, right? Like some people play against, you know, you're playing against feel, you're playing against the feel. It's like a, a friction or your
Attention,
knee.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I've played with, you know, like, you know, just Zach, for instance, who was the original Greyboy Allstars drummer. You know, he plays and you know exactly where he's sitting, and he's like a pillar, you know, and you can push him, you can try to push him over. You can do whatever you want, but he's gonna express himself. He's an alpha rhythm player, right? And then there's other people that are equally as good that are not alpha players, and then they sort of like coexist within the fabric of the group, and you can kind of push them around, and you can kind of like move with them, and it's much more of a fluid interaction, you know. And both are equally interesting, you know, or like I play with Alan Evans, you know, he swings all the time, you know,
Right, right.
and
Like, oh no, the
and
great. I love that cat. No, it's just funny because when I interviewed Roy Haynes, he said it's funny. He said he goes, I'm really more of a player. I'm not much of a talker. I'm more of a player. And
yeah,
so even I mean that guy, it's just he goes so far back in the lineage of American music, and I hate labels. It's just he
yeah.
got to know Max Roach, was in a big band from Boston, came down to the stopping at the Savoy and then met Max, and then Max gave him the job with Bird. I mean, that's like history
Mhm.
right there. The guy is just timeless. And
No,
I
it's
just,
just, you know, and I wish I could like, you know, ring off a list of facts about him, but honestly, I can't.
I did. No, I love the honesty.
Yeah.
Let me ask you let me ask you about the idea of, and maybe this would be hard to put into words too, but another guy we just lost was Lou Donaldson.
Well, Lou
And that,
Donaldson is a totally different situation. Lou Donaldson is like in the center of the Greyboy All-Stars music, you
talk
know.
about that.
He is you know, Alligator Boogaloo, those records, those are his records were the seed of the band, basically, you know. Um, his playing, his, you know, those records were the ones who were like, well, this, I want to play this music. This music's cool. I want to learn this type of thing. I want to figure out what's going on here. And it was approachable, you know, because I was originally coming from like, you know, like a blues or rock, even rockabilly, I started out in like seventh, eighth grade playing rockabilly guitar, you know.
Hmm.
Like I didn't really like blues because I didn't really like the vibe of like blues guys. I thought it was kind of like silly to play blues like in the 70s and 80s. There was so much other interesting like stuff going on, and I hadn't really been exposed to the roots of blues. I was sort of hearing like local guys. I was very young, of course, and but then I got turned on to some old rockabilly records from this weird like punk rock dude named oh God, what's his name? His last name is Warnock. Anyway, but he showed me some of these old cassette tapes, and I started learning these old rockabilly tunes, and that sort of was the way that I got into this stuff because it is kind of, soul jazz has a lot of country sort of, it has a little bit, has that country blues in it, like I love that stuff. Melvin has a lot of country in his music.
Tons. Midnight Creeper. Everything
Hmm.
I play is funky. Like Lou. I mean, can you talk about just from your own point of view? Because me and you could walk down the street. I mean, and we could ask 20 people what their concept of the word jazz is, and we might get 20 different answers. And
Hmm.
and I just wonder when you talk about that gut bucket soul jazz, which is where the All Stars, that's what caught my ear.
Hmm.
Is it just accessible because there's an R&B element to it, and it's not necessarily out of the American Songbook, or could you talk about what makes that Melvin Sparks, Leon Spencer, Lou
Yeah,
Donaldson,
yeah,
Grant Green, and what that
yeah.
acid jazz? What is makes it accessible to a street scholar punk
Well,
rocker
it's
like?
dance music. It's dance music.
Right.
That's it's first and foremost. It's the kind of music you get into a room and people show up and they have a good time and they talk and they dance and they feel good about themselves and they feel good about you and you feel good about them. And it's a very simple thing. I think, like that's the thing we're really not in our heads too much. It's very simple. It's really very simple music. It's it provides like a sets the table for improvisation, which is fun, and you can take that, you can stay inside with that, you can stay simple, you can stay minimalist, or you can syncopate the hell out of it. You can play outside, you can play against time. There's all these, it's just a nice palette. But ultimately, when we started, we wanted to have a good time. We want people to have a good time. Remember, it's 1993 and it's like grunge and everybody's really like, it's like, if it's not shoegaze, it's like shoegaze and self-loathing and nihilism and all that stuff. And we were like, let's have a fucking good time and feel sexy and feel good, and feel cool. And that was something that the band that's why people came to our shows. We weren't singing, barely saying any lyrics. We weren't telling people what to think. We're just having a good time, letting people dance and sweat.
Well, talking to Mike Andrews here on the Jake Feinberg show. I mean, going back to '93, I was in I was in ninth grade. And I definitely wasn't a music head at that point, but
Hmm.
I do know I had a conversation yesterday with a great guitar player, Avi Brown, and he was at Berkeley, and
Hmm.
he was talking about, the early '90s. You had Medeski, Martin, and Wood. You had people that
Yeah.
were really trying. And I just when you first started to want make people sweat and groove, have a good time, and were you guys already writing original tunes in '93?
Yeah, I mean, there's original tunes on West Coast Boogaloo.
Can you talk a little bit about like the germ of a tune with the early Greyboy Allstars? So only
Let
because of
me
the
look,
fact
let
that
me look at let me look at let me look at West Coast Boogaloo, and I'll
yeah,
tell you which tunes are the OG.
the OG, yeah.
Tenor Man Carl wrote. Um, let me see. Soul Dream was an original tune. Um, Fried Grease was an original tune. Tenor Man was an original tune. Gravy was an original tune. Browns at Home were original tune. So yeah, I mean, we started out learning like, let the music take your mind or something like that. We made it our own. We Fire Eater classic,
Oh God, Rusty
Riverside
Bryant, you kidding me,
classics.
dude?
Yeah. And so we learned these tunes, and honestly, no one no one around us had heard those tunes except for people that had heard Greyboy
Uh-huh.
spinning them, right? So,
Oh,
and then we went out and started touring, and people thought those tunes were ours, So we were like, hey, no, 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 no. We'd educate people, because there wasn't YouTube and there wasn't, you had to get the record to like hear these jams. So, or you could come see us play live, right? And at that time, I don't think there were really that many people playing Boogaloo. It was
no way. No way. I mean, this is, I guess, the larger question that, in hindsight with the origin or
Mhm,
with Grey Boy in that 90s pocket before Napster. I was still using a dial-up modem
mhm.
at BU in '99. And I'm curious
Yeah.
about not that because you guys were a couple questions. Do you think, when looking back at that time, even though you were playing Fire Eater and let the
Mhm,
music take your mind and you make it your own, and then you were playing Fried Grease and
mhm.
Gravy and all the original tunes, was there still the opportunity to monetize or commodify original instrumental music? I only ask that today because I know you guys can still do a couple shows here and there, but I just know my friends who are road dogging now,
Uh-huh.
playing original instrumental music. I mean, you don't even get money for the gig anymore. You get money from the merch team. And I just
Yeah,
wondered
well,
how
I don't
different.
know. You know what? It's funny because we just played in Colorado. We just did two shows in Colorado. They were crowded. We got paid, and we actually didn't even bring any merch because we don't have any merch. Um, but I at this point, I mean, back then,
Yeah,
absolutely.
back then.
I mean, we would go and play at like the Elbow Room, for instance, and we would charge, you know, $10 a head to get in. And my girlfriend at the time was standing at the door and she collected like, I mean, we did two sets. I mean, God, I feel like she collected like $7,000.
Oh my God.
It was incredible. I mean,
And
and so yes is the answer. And we did, and we played. I mean, I have my date book. We played like 300 shows a year in our first few years.
um 300, you were on the road like Buddy Rich Big Band. I mean, this
Well,
is
no, we
insane.
were in San Diego. We'd play like 3 or 4 nights a week, maybe five in San Diego. Then we'd come up, we'd play at LA, we'd play in Long Beach, we'd go to San Francisco, we'd play in San Jose. And then we started going to the East Coast and we'd do like 3 weeks at a time. And then we'd come home, we'd sleep for the day and then do the San Diego thing again. And that's kind of what got us, locked into each other. We were really, I mean, and then and that's also why we really burned out and we pretty much stopped in like, I guess, what was it? It was, I would say it was after a town called, it was like maybe a year after a town called Earth. Let's see when that was.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was like, so that came out in 97 and we
Yep.
played for probably another year. We made that, and then we got the gig to do the movie soundtrack right around that same time for Zero Effect. And then I was like, oh, I'm kind of into doing the soundtrack thing. And everybody was kind of, tired of each other or whatever a little bit and burned out from just playing together so much. Everybody wanted to do something else. So Robert went and did his thing, and he did his thing with Chimmy. Uh and Carl wanted to do stuff on his own and kind of everybody wanted to do their own thing. But up until that point, so that was a solid 3 or 4 years of like playing, like, oh my God, so much playing. And
You know,
all
it's
like
it.
car,
Yeah.
like never in a bus. It was like a car, a couple cars, a minivan in a car in a U-Haul truck.
Would you say that you were like during that early period, were you a kind of a coastal band, or were you doing flyover states too? Like, were you doing full cross country tours?
No, not really. I mean, we were doing regional stuff. Like we'd go to Chicago, and we'd play in Chicago, we'd play in Michigan, and we'd play in St. Louis, and we hopped on a Ben Harper tour, we'd hop on but we were mostly doing our own thing, fly to the East Coast, play up and down the East Coast, fly to New Orleans, do a thing around there, you know. We drove to Texas a few times. We used to go to Austin quite a bit and do Austin, Houston, Dallas, but those are hard. Yeah, it was hard, like a lot of driving.
I mean, so you would, I mean, you're talking about San Diego driving to Chicago.
No, 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 no. We always flew in. We
So
flew in
you
and
did have, yeah. So I guess you just had these shows in Colorado. I saw some pictures. Where were you playing, by the way? Cervantes, or where were you playing?
no, we didn't play Cervantes. We played the Gothic and we played the Boulder Theater.
I mean, how, looking back on it, I don't know what the right word is, gratitude or timing is everything in life, but it's so unique now to have a band that can just get paid for the gig itself, at least among my peers at 46.
Yeah,
And I just, do
yeah.
you look back on that time and how grateful you are that you went through a period of time where you were able to develop regional fan bases? Because, and do you attribute the fact that you can just go in, no merch, no stress, get paid now because of the name that you had in the early 90s?
Well, I mean, I think, well, there's a lot of factors that come into play with that. I mean, just in terms of thinking about the logic of that. Um, we, I think a lot of people, first of all, we've been doing it for 32 years now, right?
Right.
And there's very few people that have been doing it for as long as we have that are still that are still like basically the same band, let alone any genre. So
True.
there's that element to it. There's people, and then also remember, everybody in the band has continued to do things. Robert's continued to make records. Carl works his ass off all the time. And so even though the Greyboy Allstars maybe aren't out there as a unit, as a complete unit, we're all in the ether everywhere, always doing things, right? So it's sort of a multi-pronged unit that has maintained its connection with the live audience in different ways the whole time. So, has it switched to like Carl Denson? A little bit, like I think people are really excited to see Carl. He tours all the time, so he's maintained a constant connection with the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
I it's when you first came, when you connected with those cats, I mean, you're very humble about it. But you were a self-taught musician. Were you a little bit, were there other cats in the band, the original band, that just had a larger vocabulary? What was the learning curve for you? Or did you just fall right in and just had huge elephant
well,
ears?
I mean, I had already been playing, I've been playing guitar since I was 5 years old, so I was good at the guitar. It wasn't whether that I and I can and ultimately I kind of just consider myself a rhythm player anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but but yeah, I mean, here's the funny truth of it is that when Greyboy Allstars when they first started, and we really started just to play one gig for DJ Greyboy's release of Freestylin'. That was the original
Right,
concept.
right, right.
So we got together to do that gig, and the makeup of the band was myself on rhythm guitar, this guy Mark Antoine on lead guitar because he played lead guitar. He played like jazz guitar on Andreas's record Freestyling. I wasn't on that record. I came in later, and then Carl Denson, and then Harold Todd was the second horn player, saxophone and flute. Um,
Wow.
and so we had two guys in the front, and then Robert, who also sort of mostly considered himself a rhythm player, Robert Walter, and then Chris and Zach kind of came as a pair because they had been playing in bands together, and they were great. But remember, Zach was 19 years old. I was 24. Robert was 22. Chris was 25. So we're very young, really. So I don't know how much they would have known anyway. And they're all from San Diego, and no one had really ever even left San Diego except Carl and me, because I had toured before for my earlier band.
Right.
So the vocabulary was, we were just basically devouring the catalog that Greyboy was spinning weekly. And we would go over to his house and we would just dig through the stacks, listen to music, learn music. Um, and then equally on our own, we would go. Zach and Chris were very much already into like P-Funk and all that stuff. And Chris is like has like an incredible knowledge of music, and he always has. His dad was really into different kinds of music, showing him, you know, all types of music, modern classical music, jazz music, all that stuff. So Chris had really big ears already. And Zach obviously was just gifted, a gifted rhythm player on the drums. Carl obviously had already made jazz records, right? He had already done his like black and red snapper, or he had a few records. He had made a record with Fred Wesley already. So yeah, I was probably, maybe I was the worst guy in the band. I don't know. Maybe, if that sort of the root of the question, I was
Well, no, I
happy.
mean, I just,
I
you know,
was happy to be in a place where I could learn instead of be the guy that told everybody what to do. I mean, it's so great to be in a band where everybody's so good, right? And that I can learn.
I think it's fantastic. It's also revelatory. Even though, I wonder about, maybe it's self-explanatory, but like with Robert, over time with you, brother Walter,
Hmm.
guys that came in maybe as more rhythm players, um, did you um, were there opportunities for you to where the band would push you guys out of your comfort zone, and then in fact your instrumental or your improvisational chops grew because
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that was the whole point of it, right? I mean,
right.
we were playing and it was like, okay, Carl plays two, three choruses, four choruses. Okay, your turn. And I was like, all right,
Yep,
and
here I
and
go. Yeah.
it's just like, who are you? What do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Like, there you are. It's like whatever. Like, I think it was Miles Davis was like, you can, there you go. Like, if you're gonna make a mistake, it's your mistake. It's not my mistake. If you're gonna do something great, then go ahead. Here's your turn, right?
I guess I couldn't ask a better person, someone that has not been tainted by the ivory tower or the academy, someone who obviously came aboard during a very interesting time in the 80s and even in the 90s. And then you were able to basically grow as a musician on the bandstand 300 days a year. Um, and we're inundated today with so much visual material on YouTube and so much
Mm,
mediocre material. Whereas before, the stuff you were digging through Greyboy's record collection, that was the cream of
mm,
the crop. I mean, you had to clear
yeah,
a bar in
yeah.
order to get a record out. And yet you still, Brother Andrews, you found your own individual sound through your own musical path. And I just wonder with cats today going through a sort of linear educational process, you got to get through high school, then you go into one of these schools. Every school has a music school now. And a
Hmm.
lot of cats come out sounding. I remember Gary Bart's, Oberlin. He's like, he's like, it's hard. I have students that come out and they sound like me. And so
Yeah.
there's like a homogenization of sound. And so I wanted you to talk to younger cats about if there are things that you that you really were able to cultivate that allowed you to forge your own individual sound, especially on guitar, and what would be your advice for them today? Because the conformity today, from my point of view, is disheartening to a degree.
Hmm. Well, I can just speak for myself. I don't know if it's going to educate anybody, but I can just say like what it basically was for me.
Absolutely.
Um, mostly just first of all, I have a few different paths that I've been on as a guitar player that I recognize are substantial and often don't intersect. Like I'm a I love playing acoustic guitar. I love open tuning. I love like John Fahey and Bert Jansch and Nick Drake and
Ah,
Neil
the best.
Young and
Yeah. Yeah.
Joni Mitchell and I love I've spent a lot of time with open tuning and with sort of expanding my ear color with color and more chordal stuff, right? Not so much jazz. Um and then primarily came from a blues and rockabilly space. So then I needed a door to jazz, and the soul jazz was the door from blues to jazz, right? So that was like, okay, I can do this. And then it was like, who can I listen to that besides just playing with, now I'm already playing in Greyboy Allstars at this point, right?
Right.
And Robert's, and people are just playing solos in my ears all night long. Carl and Robert, and I'm working on my rhythm playing, But then I come across a few people that are like, that tell me like, okay, I know I have good rhythm, right? So I listen to the Meters, I listen to James Brown, I listen to Boogaloo Joe Jones, I listen to Grant
Um,
Green, and I find a door, right? I find a door. Mainly Boogaloo Joe Jones was the guy who was like, this guy is not playing the blues, but he's playing the blues. What the hell is going on here, right? Then this,
oh,
before I learned, because I heard about Grant Green, but of course, like you start digging into Grant Green's records, and immediately they're just like they're very overwhelming to me. Trying to learn, it's just like I'm not that good. I'm not that good yet. I need to go. Let me back up a few paces here. Like here's Boogaloo Joe Jones, and then I'm like, okay, Boogaloo Joe Jones. Okay, great. And then it's like, all right, Melvin Sparks. There's the next step. This is the next step in the complicated nature of jazz guitar, right? For me, I'm like, okay, so I was like Boogaloo Joe Jones, Melvin Sparks. Then I get better and I learn a little bit of Grant Green. And then I get better and I learn a little bit of Pat Martino. But then I come back and I listen to George Benson. George Benson's just like, oh shit, so much going on, so fast, so many ideas, so many melodic ideas, so much rhythm, so much ease, so incredible. And he's 19 years old, right?
right.
Blows my mind, you know? And then I started to listen to more, and then I got in deeper into the catalog of Pat Martino and I started listening to that. Then meanwhile, I back out and I learn, it all the while I'm getting solos blown in my ear all night long, and I'm spending time alone, continuing to work on open tuning, acoustic guitar, continuing to songwrite, continuing to produce records. Like, so I have all these influences coming at me, but I'm also still trying to find private time to figure out who I am as a person and guitar player. But meanwhile, also all the time being put on the spot, like bam, bam, what do you want to do? What do you want to say? What are you going to do? What are you going to say? And also trying to be in a state of abandon basically all the time on stage. I don't really want to think about what I'm doing. I never think about what I'm going to do next. I don't really care what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to be in the moment. I'm not like gonna make sure I get this lick in or that lick or imitate this guy and then imitate that guy. I don't really care about that at all while I'm on stage. I am completely in free fall the whole time. And you saw it on bass the other night. I'm
Dude,
not
that
thinking
was
about,
so fucking great because it was
I'm
so
not thinking,
greasy and weird, man. It was awesome.
yeah, but that's where I am. I thank you. I'm glad you think so. Sometimes it's a total failure, but at least people
No, it
know.
was you, man. It was totally you.
Yeah, well, that's what no one's gonna say that I don't try. You know,
Dude, you're
and
making my day right now, man. I mean,
you
this is
know,
like, go ahead, continue. Yeah.
no, I mean, that's it. I mean, that's really it. That's it in a nutshell. I try to, I'm trying to stay in the moment. I'm trying to figure out where I am in the form, but also say like, I'm going to mess with where you think I am in the form. I'm going to, I'm going to try to play with the idea of, maybe I'm not in the form. Maybe I am in the form. Maybe I'll catch up with the form in a little bit. Maybe I'm going to play against it. Maybe I'm going to make mistakes for like 30 seconds and you're going to think I don't have any idea what I'm doing, and I probably don't. But I'm great at jumping back on the train. That's what the guys in the band will tell you, that I'm good at I'm good. I'm like a cat. I follow my feet.
Yeah, that's what it's funny. I just interviewed second interview with Greg Osby last week, and he was talking about this teacher who said he really helped him get out of a lot of musical corners when he backed himself in, or
Mhm.
you do these 30 seconds of sort of clams or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you sort of like you said you jump, you get back on your feet, and it's like the two cats that came to mind because there's three actually. Um, First of all, it's interesting about these doors you talk about. The guy that I play for a lot of people And when they hear him and they do a deep dive, they kind of, it's not like who's better, but they kind of think he's a little bit greasier than even Grant Green is O'Donnell Levy.
Oh
Have you
yeah,
ever?
he is. He is.
Yeah. Because I just connected and it was a Godhead connection with Chester Thompson, the drummer, and he broke down their groove in Baltimore. And I mean, even Chester said he's like, because that was the first gig he had. And
Oh yeah,
he's
that's
like,
cool.
dude, I would not have gone into these part of towns unless I had a gig. And they were basically Baltimore being a hard scrabble blues R&B town.
Mhm.
It was they were doing more, female singers. It was still incredibly deep, heavy backbeat, a lot of
Mhm.
soul.
Mhm.
And those records, I have to believe Walt. I have to believe you guys were cranking those O'Donnell Levy
Yeah, those that O'Donnell Levy's awesome. A
records.
couple other people though now O'Donnell Levy, I believe, was like a friend of was like wasn't he a friend of George Benson? Wasn't he George Benson's friend?
Well, he came from Baltimore, and though I don't know about that. Lonnie Smith, Dr. Lonnie, was super tight with George, but O'Donnell really was more the Jimmy, McGriff and McDuff hired those
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
cats.
Well, yeah. I mean, those are all good. I mean, yeah, listening to the Jimmy McGriff records and the what is it, Jackie McLean records?
Yeah, yeah.
Those were all, and those were the records that I was listening to where I was like, oh, I could learn from almost every instrumentalist on this record.
Wow, wow.
I'm trying to remember which record it was that had, I think that had, well, cookbook was great because it had that great baritone saxophone on it. I
You're
remember
talking
that.
about the Benson album, yeah,
The early one, but
yeah, yeah, the double album, yeah, I know that, yeah.
yeah. But then there's a couple other steps where I was turned and I was like really pumped was when I first also heard Gabor Szabo. That was like a
Oh,
moment where I was like, okay, this guy's coming from a folk, kind of like a folk gypsy space, right? And
totally.
he was almost like a simpler version of Pat Martino, right?
I love that analogy. Yeah, I mean,
Really
Pat was like a
cool.
machine gun, dude.
And then it was cool to me because he had guys on his records that had been on these folk records that I liked, Jim Keltner. It's like, okay, right. Okay, so these guys were also into all these things I was into. And then it's like, oh, these guys are like pentangle, but they're like funkier. They're leaning into this funk stuff. They're leaning into their jazz stuff.
Michael
Um,
Andrews, I mean, this is such a gratifying, I mean, it's so great when you hit, I mean, again, you've talked about all these different lack of these non-intersecting pathways of rockabilly, blues, open tuning. You were in
mhm.
Greyboy. The other cat that always gets me, and I remember when I interviewed David T. Walker, and he was talking about this cat because I mean, this guy would give the shirt off his back to anybody, but he was also running these sophisticated blues lines in his licks. Is Mel Brown?
Mel Brown. I haven't dug much into Mel Brown. I haven't.
Chicken fat. Like you should. The impulse stuff is money in the bank for Michael
Oh,
Andrews,
right. I
dude.
probably have heard of it. Let me check it out.
Yeah, no, you'll dig it a lot. I just,
Oh, that's cool.
the
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I've heard some of this stuff.
I'd rather suck my thumb. I mean, you guys were just it's I remember Kofi Burbridge told me, rest in peace. He said he was on tour with Felix Pistorius, Jeff Sipe. They were in a band. It was like a quintet or something, and they were driving through Appalachia, and it was like 3 week, long, like third week of a 4 week tour, and everybody was sick. The weather was atrocious, and it was just a real. It just was felt like a drag, and they get to a sports bar wherever they were playing, and nobody really cared whether they were there or not, and because the Kofi especially was not feeling well, and all he could focus on was getting into bed. That
Hmm.
he actually, because he was so altered and left, he wasn't thinking. That it actually turned the music, the band, into a completely. I mean, he just never played like that in his life. It was a completely transcendent experience. I remember
That's interesting.
Chris Parker from Stuff coming back from New Orleans. He had pneumonia, and everyone's
Mhm.
saying, dude, you gotta get into bed. You gotta go to the hospital. And he was playing that night at Stuff with Steve Gadd doing double drums. And he's like, I'm not missing this gig at McKell's. He shows up, fucking all he could think about was crawling into bed. He felt like death. And when he got off the stage, fans were coming up to him saying, I have never seen you play with that kind of urgency before.
That's awesome.
And I just wonder, like, when, it's one of these things like fatigue or physical illness, not feeling well. Like, can you talk about a seminal time for you when you were just like, you were completely out of your thinking mind because it was all about survival and you just played like you had never played before?
Gosh. Well, I remember, I don't know if it was good or not, although I think maybe I don't know. I do remember one time. So we used to, when we were on our early days, we used to go to San Francisco
Right.
a lot. To the point where we were like pretty tired of going there, quite honestly. And we would keep playing the same place. We'd go to Santa Cruz and we'd play, this, God, I gotta remember
The
what it,
Catalyst? Were you playing the
no,
Catalyst?
no, we played, it was right around the corner from the Catalyst. It almost like shared a wall with the Catalyst.
Really?
It was like a public space. I forget the name of the place. We'd play there. But anyway, this was, I believe like the Dead was like still going at that point.
Right.
I mean, in its origin, almost in its completely original format, right? What year did Jerry die?
Yeah, no, we're talking like, I mean, this 94, 95. That
Yeah.
95 is when
Okay,
Jerry
so they're
died.
still playing. So there's this guy that used to go to see us play, and he would always brew this mushroom tea,
Oh, yeah.
and he would give us like a gallon of it when we showed up. And at first I was like, I don't really trust this guy. So, but everyone was like, "Oh, he's cool." He was apparently, I forget his name, but he was apparently like one of like the financial guys for like this group that followed the Dead. There was like a very specific name for his group of people. But anyway,
Wow.
apparently like during the day the guy was like totally normal, but at night or at shows, the dude would like literally strip down to like cutoffs and fucking be like super crazy high.
Oh, my
And
God. Yeah, this,
so he hooked us up with this tea, and occasionally we would drink it. But so we ended up that we were also commonly at that time we were going to Tahoe and playing a lot during the winter time. So we went up to Tahoe, and it was really really tough because the driving there was like insane. There was so much snow. We always like were driving through crazy snowstorms. But we'd get up there, we'd be tired, and it would be like we'd basically be like snowed in. We'd set up at this place up there called Humpty's, is what it was
oh,
called.
this is, you
People,
were going Donner Pass or like, that's
yes,
rugged up
exactly.
there.
So
Yeah,
people
yeah.
may recall that. So we would play at Humpty's. But one night I remember we all drank that mushroom tea. We were so tired, and I remember all of us being really pretty high. And I remember this, I mean, I don't, again, I'm saying maybe I wasn't playing very good, but I sure felt like it. And I just felt like I had my hand on my guitar and my hand on the strings. And it just felt like this energy that was like, it was almost like my guitar was completing a circle.
Wow. Wow.
And, and, and I looked over at Robert and he looked at me like, yeah, we're all like, we're,
That you're
it
all
was just,
operating on the same frequency. I
yeah, we
freaking
were
love
all
that.
right there. So we played this gig. It was a great gig. And I think there's a tape of it. I want to find a tape. I think Robert told
I need to hear
me the
Mike
tape.
Andrews on the
Yeah.
mushrooms. I need to hear the
Yeah.
band on the
Yeah. It's
mushrooms.
good. And I remember specifically finishing the gig. Everybody left. It was still snowing. And we came out and we walked onto the highway. And no one had driven there for quite some time, and there was no car tracks in this. There were no car tracks on the street. There was no
Oh,
footprints anywhere. It was like somehow everybody and everything had disappeared. It was just insane. It was such a great moment.
it was like the end. That was the end of the trip. or it's just
Yeah.
it was everything
It
advanced.
was
I mean,
somewhere
that
along the way, but it felt good. And I just remember feeling very sort of at one with my instrument. And normally I'm basically at war with my instrument. So that was a good moment. And hopefully it sounded good.
well, no, we're gonna have to. Do we have a tape from Humpty's, or there's
I'm
another?
sure I think we do.
I
I think we
really
can
need to
find
hear because I mean that's the magic of becoming. Did you have a chance to like clearly? The ultimate goal is to uh, reach a point where the band is all operate. It's like one sound.
it.
You
Yeah.
get to that one. That's sort of the holy grail experience, and I just um, you know, you feel like that it's just funny because there's a lot. That's the other thing I wanted to ask you about is the idea that like you have today.
Well, here we
uh
go. Internet Archive, 1995. There's shows up on the Internet Archive.
oh my God, are you oh my,
Yeah,
this
here's
is
one
gonna
here.
be.
I see one here. Here's one from October 22nd, 1995. So that wouldn't have been snowing. Here's one 2897. That one's maybe the one.
But you said that it was maybe the Mushroom Tea Cat was just because 97 the Dead were done, but I mean the
No, no, okay, right. So it would have to be before then. So we'd have to look for a 96, maybe 95, 96, but it would have to.
well
Tumpty's Tahoe. I don't know. You're gonna have to look. I'm looking at it
I'm
on the
gonna dig through
internet.
if
There's some.
yeah.
Robert knows what it is. I'll have to find it. Anyway, what would
You,
somebody?
you,
You were saying? What were you saying?
no, no, no. I was. It's just the question I have is as you move along. I mean, you specifically, but everybody was, you were getting fed like all different types of music, and people from the band were coming in with all different types of influences. And I really liked what you said because I've been asking a lot of cats about this idea of um, getting out of your thinking mind and into the spirit mind on the bandstand, where
Mhm.
you're not thinking at all, and you're just reacting to sound. And I remember, Gregorico walking. A lot of people don't know he had a cup of coffee with a Weather Report after Eric Gravatt left the band, and he was walking by Wayne Shorter's room one day. Wayne was like from the morning until the gig sound check, he was chanting, that kind of mantra yoga.
Uh-huh.
And Greg's like, why? He's like, what? He's like, why are you doing that all day? And Wayne's like, I'm just praying he's like, I'm chanting for that big payday, man. And I wonder about that idea of do you have some sort of, it doesn't have to be traditional meditation, but over time, especially when those grueling tours were happening, and um, did you have a way of whether it was chanting or meditation to clear yourself so that you could become a conduit for information coming through you?
Hmm. Yeah, it's never been something that I've understood,
Yeah,
honestly, the way
yeah,
that I'm not going to claim to be very enlightened when it comes to that, but I understand what you're saying. I think that like there is something that you want to be basically you want to try to be relaxed on stage. I think that's really what it comes down to, right? Like because that allows you to be in the moment. Um, And for me, there's something about knowing that I'm not holding up the group and it's not my responsibility necessarily they're dependent on me, but not on me alone, And
exactly. Right. You don't have to
I
do it
think there's
all
some,
yourself.
I
Right.
think there's something important, and that's something that we've all understood in the band. And I think that's one of the things that makes us a true band is we're five legs, and that way no one person has to carry that much. And knowing that, I mean, even though if it's not, I mean, there's times in the set we're all carrying different things at different times, but I think knowing, and when you get on stage and you know that you have that support, that you know that you have like a good team, it's probably like a great basketball team or, football team that knows like, oh, well, I know that guy over there is going to block for me, and I know that guy's going to throw it to me, and he's going to not throw it over my head, he's going to throw it right into my arms. Just like that kind of thing that you have with the band. Um,
Yeah, no, it's also
enter
like
we just enter onto the stage with like confidence, like I have to say it's hard for me to feel that confidence in any other situation, and that's why I often don't that's why you haven't seen me like be in a lot of other bands, especially in like an improvisatory situation. I mean, I what I know Josh and Jason. I've known both those guys for quite some time, and I feel good.
I just wanted you to stop right there. I need you, those two guys. I mean, I live in Tucson and I love so many musicians. I don't think, I mean, I can think of a few more, but those guys are two of my five favorite musicians on the planet by far.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
want, how did you meet them and talk about the charisma? Because to me, what I like, they have that fuck it approach where
Yeah.
it's just like, we're going to be melodic and we're going to be nasty. And it's not, nothing is too precious. The music is not that precious, but it's going to sear into your soul.
Yeah. I mean, I've known Josh. The first time I met Josh, I was playing music from my first solo record called Hand on String, where I put a band together with Gus Seifert, who was from Kansas City.
Right.
So when we went, he was the bass player. And so when we went, we did a little nation tour. And when we went to Kansas City, Jake Blanton and Josh had a band, and they opened up for us in Kansas City.
Wow.
And that's when I met him, and that was in 2006 maybe. Um, and I just love Josh from the minute I met him. He's such a great player and such a sweet guy, and that was super cool. And Gus is one of my very, very close friends. And so I just love the nature of the guys that I met from Kansas City. They were all so sweet. And then Josh and Jake ended up moving to town here, shortly thereafter. I think it maybe was a couple years later. Um, and I was really excited about playing with them, but I just ended up getting really busy with all my film stuff, and I never got to devote time to playing with those guys, which I regret. But I still got to record with Josh on many occasions. Jason, I met through Gus as well because he was playing in Gus's band um, with Josh when Josh moved. So he became the guitar player in that group, and he was great. Got such a great attitude and such a fun player, you
I mean,
know.
I just love that. This is making my day. I mean, the idea that I'm sorry, what was the project? So you actually, because um, you obviously got immersed in the soundtrack world, but you did do a few tours here and there. Obviously, that's how you went to Kansas City. Is that right? I mean, you did
Well,
Darko
yeah,
five
I
and a
mean, well, no, I did a couple, I've made a couple solo records that were basically me, just
right.
lonerism style, playing everything. And these are more like songwriter records where it's sort of the other side of my coin, which is like, folk and sort of funky folk music that I've been sort of working on the side.
I did.
That's more like, my other more personal, I guess, more personal perspective. And that's when I got to do that. But then yeah, and then I came back after that tour and quite honestly realized that like starting over as a solo artist was like pretty daunting. And I realized like, well, I have my score thing going on. I play with Greyboy. That's a great outlet. And I'm about to, start having a family and stuff like that. So then I didn't end up touring that very often. So
No, because the day after the show, Josh and I were hanging after the show, and I was like, "Who were those guests up there?" And he told me about you, and then he sent me tracings. 2006, which he said was, he said you basically played everything on that record, he said.
Yeah.
Um, you know, did you just do something related to Wayne Shorter, paying homage to him, writing tunes about Wayne?
Oh, that was our thing that we just that was our so we have a record that's coming out here next week.
Yeah,
Uh, the Greyboy new Greyboy record, which is sort of a compilation of sort of songs that were kind of outliers on previous records, and then a couple recent recordings that were sort of outliers on our most recent record that we're working on now. And one of the tunes that just came out is called Boxes. That's a Robert composition, but it was I think it was inspired by Wayne Shorter. Yeah, for him, it was an inspiration. But of course, I didn't know that, so I didn't approach it at all like that. I
yeah,
was
of course
playing
you did. And
like
I was going to say,
if you
we got it
listen
with
to
the
it, I'm
melody.
basically like whatever is in the background that sounds more like noise and keyboards, that's my guitar. And then
No, it's
there's some like
always
elect,
sound,
and then
man.
there's
Yeah,
some
no
like
noise, no noise.
and then there's some and then I think I played my electric sort of like my choral sitar on that as well. So there's a there was I was yeah, that's the thing. I guess when we get into situations with Greyboy where it gets too into sort of like a traditional jazz world, I operate as the disruptor.
I freaking love this, dude. Because I mean, traditional jazz. I mean, sometimes I also just wonder if you could talk about this. This is something because John Simon, great producer, great musician too, and he produced the Brown album and music from Big Pink and the band,
Mhm.
among others.
Mhm.
Did a lot
Yes.
of Taj Mahal stuff and Blood, Sweat,
Beautiful.
and Tears, master. And he
Yeah.
would talk about. I just couldn't ask a better person too because he would talk about sitting there with Robbie Robertson, maybe Levon a little bit. Everything they did, everything they did as it related to song concepts, that kind of stuff, it was all pre-production. There was almost no post-production. They
Hmm.
would have the concepts, they would have the understanding of the tunes, they'd work it out. And it was generally, they had the ability to have their own studio. It wasn't they weren't on studio time, but
Hmm.
ultimately once the songs were cut, that's what was cut. And I wonder about how I know you're from a different generation, but
Hmm.
and I'm not even talking about soundtracks, but
Hmm.
in general, what is your philosophy as it relates to pre and post production? Because the one thing and I guess this is probably where the rubber meets the road between pro and amateur, is there's so much emphasis. I mean, I just see people talking, yeah, my album's going to come out soon. And they're perseverating about making it whatever perfect means. And they wind up sucking all the soul out of it because of the post
Hmm.
production. I just wonder how you've evolved in your experience, not over relying on taking the soul out of the music through post production.
Hmm. Well, we don't really spend much time recording, I will tell you that. Our first record was made in one day.
Good.
Our second record was made in 5 days. We've never spent more than 10 days on a record. Um, and mainly, I mean, I wouldn't say there's much pre-production and there isn't much post-production. It's kind of just like, hey, here's the tune. We learn it, we play it a few times, and then we make a record. And then it's just there. It's like there's the sort of there it is, in its first incarnation is in the record.
Right.
And and
It was birthed that, you do a few
yeah.
takes, I mean, why do you feel, I mean, maybe you're not even, what do you do with soundtracks? I mean, how much post production is
Uh,
involved with that?
well, it's a different process because I'm doing most of it alone. Or Robert helps me with a lot of it too. He plays keyboards and stuff on it and sort of is there in some of the initial writing blast off sessions that I do when I first start a movie. He's an incredible person to have around in that situation.
He's a
He's
badass, yeah.
incredibly supportive, and he's been just been just really instrumental in my growth as a writer and a composer. Um, but but it's more like, I guess, depending. I mean, it depends what kind of movie I'm doing. Sometimes I'm doing like a pretty traditional movie, and it's like I write a tune and I write some themes, and then I'm just like putting the themes around the movie, and there's that kind of thing. But then when there's stuff that's a little bit more like abstract or collagey or ambient or more painterly, then the process is all writing, but it's all like it's like a process of like revision. So you're constantly building something up, and then you're breaking it down, and then you're building it up, and you're breaking it down, and you're sort of reshaping it like you would. Like the only thing I can liken it to is it's like painting. Like you paint an image, you paint something fairly abstract, you reinforce it, then it becomes clear that there's a form, and then once the form's there, you mess with it, and then you reduce it again to find another form within that form. I mean, it's just that kind of process. So it's neither pre nor post. It just is. It's not, I don't really look at it like that. Like I'm not taking a snapshot of anything. I'm constantly developing.
You know, I remember I've done about 8 interviews with Keltner and the other cat that um was the father of Jeff Porcaro, Joe Porcaro. And I
Hmm.
remember with get the sound, get the name of uh the soundtrack. It might have been uh, the Bob Dylan soundtrack with Keltner.
Mm.
Um, uh, Billy the Kid, 19 early 70s. He said basically like um they would put the projector, they'd project the film onto a wall,
Hmm.
and then the musicians would play to the vibe of the scene.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean,
and
that's what
and,
I
and
do all
Por,
day long.
so you're because Porcaro was talking about him and Shelley, man, and Emil doing that.
Yeah.
There'd be a nightclub scene that they put up silent, and then the band would play to them, to that mood. And you're
Hmm.
telling me that you still, I mean, I would have. Is that something
Yeah.
that you still do today?
I still do that every day. I
That
did
is
I did it
freaking
yesterday
awesome.
all day long.
So how do you, as the and you're not playing, you're just producing, is that right?
No, I'm playing. I'm writing and playing most everything. I mean, almost
Wow.
everything.
So basically,
I'm
though,
like I basically am a keyboard player all the time. It's barely, I mean, that's the other thing. It's hard to keep my guitar chops up. I'm literally playing keyboards all day long.
you have you worked? So you are doing essentially all of the instrument. You're doing it all yourself, though.
No, I have an engineer, and I'm in my studio that's a full-on recording studio,
Wow.
with multiple rooms and all my stuff set up. I have, basically all the bandy kind of instruments set up, and then I have all a bunch of keyboards and some noise kind of generating elements, and then I have a different room that has like, computer with, all kinds of, plugins and all that kind of stuff, modern stuff there. And so I basically have an array of sounds from, organic to abstract and granular, all whatever, everything. And so depending on the movie, I'm just in there making stuff. I don't know how to describe it.
No,
Just
I
like
think it's. I mean,
it's
it's.
like I mean, I'm just constantly improvising, hoping to find something in there, and sometimes it materializes, right? I mean, I'm writing all day long, every day.
Part of my fantasy and is just that you'd bring in a vibes player and a drummer. Have you brought human? Is it all? Is it? I don't want to say it's a control thing, but improvisation wise and just trying to get what you really want. Is it easier to do it yourself? Because I mean, Lalo,
I mean, I think that there's all kinds of constraints. Like when I'm working on a smaller movie, to have a bunch of people come in and just kind of like shoot around, um, it's very expensive to do that.
right.
I'll be quite honest with you. So like on a little movie, it's not really affordable to do something like that. So I will do it all. I will usually do it all myself, or I'll get it going. And then I'll be like, okay, it would be great to have someone that was a little bit more advanced on this, or like maybe I'm using like fake strings and I want someone to come and like put a human strings on it. So I'll get some strings to come in. I use my friend Gabe Noel, who's an incredible bassist and cellist. He'll come in and do
Wow. Wow. I love that. You're not using any. you're not using any synthesizer effects or strings. You're
I
bringing
mean,
a real string.
you know what? I'm not precious about that. I honestly, my
Yeah.
feeling is like, you know, often I think, I'm not precious about it. I think the idea trumps the means all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this has to be one of the string players from the symphony that'll make me my shit more legit. I don't really care about that at all. I just like I want people when they hear it to be like, oh, that sounds good. I'm making records like all the time. I'm just cutting through the weeds all day long trying to make something happen, however I can. I'll use anything. I'll use my computer, I'll use my iPad, I'll use my guitar, I'll use my banjo, I'll use a bowl. I don't care.
Use a water phone, who
A water,
knows?
sure. I've used a water phone. I've been through the water phone. Well, but then that's another case. Well, I have a great friend who's an amazing percussion player who I've collaborated with a lot, Davey Chegwidden, who's incredible.
Yeah.
He comes and plays his junk that he's collected from thrift stores for the last 30 years, and he's incredible. It just depends on what like the parameters are of the music. I've done all different kinds of stuff. I've played stuff that's like the whole thing's a mini moog or whatever. It doesn't. There's all different kinds of ways to skin it, whatever feels appropriate. And also wherever I am in the moment is kind of what it is.
One final question and set one for you, Michael Andrews. It's been such an honor to talk to you. Have you ever been to Different Fur Studios?
Different Fur. Oh, Different Fur was the studio that what's
Dr.
his
Patrick Gleason and
yeah,
Coppola had.
I've hung
Yeah.
with Patrick Gleason.
Yeah, no, he's a. I've slept over at his house many times. I mean, he's a dear
Yeah.
friend of. Dude, so you and Dr. Patrick have hung before because I'm.
I've hung with him. I met him
Oh, this
through
is great.
my friend Jeffrey Plansker, who's a DJ at Dub Lab.
Wow.
He hooked up
Yes,
with him.
yes, yes,
He
yes.
hooked up with him and brought me along. And, like, yeah, Patrick, see, Patrick's interesting because like he started out as like a modular synthesis guy, right? And
Absolutely.
he owned Different Fur. And everything about him. But anyway, so he's like another one of these guys. Like he's he's very non-traditional. He'll make shit however he can. Now he's on his computer, right? Now he's on his
Dude, it's
computer. It's
insane.
totally fine, right?
Totally. No, I just like the fact that if you have a little bit of a budget and you're looking for something more authentic, you'll bring the cats to bring in if you want those cellos. Just part of me just misses even at 46. Um, you're doing it. You're doing what you have to do in the modern era. It's just those pictures of Lalo having 200 cats in the studio doing a soundtrack. It's
Yeah.
just, to me, that would be an awe-inspiring
Well,
event.
I've done that. I've done orchestral sessions where there's been, 90 people at Sony. Um,
Right.
and I've done stuff at Warner Brothers and Capitol and all that. When the time permits, it's good, but I,
Hey man, I dig
I
it,
can
man.
only,
You
I
can't
guess I
be.
can only do what people ask me to do in terms of like, my day job as a composer. Um, there's so much music that I love that I aspire to in the score world that from just as there are great records from the past, there are great composers from the past that I really admire, and that's part of that's what informs me every day too. So it's like you know I haven't, yeah. I mean, sometimes movies permit me to do stuff that I'm really inspired by, and sometimes they're not asking for that, So I just have to, it's like a architect's job, Sometimes they just want a four-bedroom house, and so you make them a four-bedroom house.
But absolutely, I was gonna say the tour you guys, you got Santa Cruz, Oakland, Frisco, Solano Beach, and then in the new
Yeah.
year, Los Angeles. I'm throwing my hat in the ring, Michael Andrews.
Yeah.
I'd love to see you guys come to Tucson or Arizona in general. It'd be so great
Oh,
to
yeah. I mean, where would we play there?
There's actually, well, it would depend. I mean, the Rialto is kind of the de facto place that,
Okay.
but
Okay.
actually the better venue. I mean, there's a few things, but their smaller venue is 191 Tool, but I feel like that and that's more like a Moe's Alley vibe, which is what you're playing
Okay.
and saying.
Okay.
So yeah, 191 Tool. I mean, Rialto, like that is
Hmm.
money in the bank. It would just be, man. It was as a broadcaster, I never saw myself as a promoter, and I'm very much pick and choose what I like to do.
Yeah.
But to like see you come on stage and just freaking in that angular. I mean, you were playing bass, and you just and just like angular.
I love playing bass.
Oh my God. And it was just, I just was such an honor afterwards because, cats that were totally hip to you guys from the East Coast saw those clips and were loving it. And I was like, so I would love to have you guys come down here, man, especially because, it's not
I know,
115
dude.
degrees anymore.
I used to go to Arizona a lot. My dad is from Arizona. My dad was born in Mesa.
Wow.
When it
Yeah.
was
I mean,
grass
Phoenix is
town.
cool. I'll take Phoenix. Flag is a little too far for me, but I'm telling you,
Yeah.
Rialto 191 Tool in the new
Okay.
year for
All
the
right.
All Stars, man.
Dude, I mean, it's not that far. We could just go there, and it's also a cheap flight too.
Hey, I would just love to see it. I've never seen you guys live. I will tell
Oh,
you
well.
that like Groove Collective,
Why don't you come to the lodge room? I'll set you up with tickets and you can
2-7. All right. It's on the books, dude. I'm coming.
please.
All right. And let's do another interview down the road. I got a lot more to get to, but we've been burning for like an hour 15 here.
Yeah.
It was a ball, man. And,
It's really great talking to you. I love you. You've got such a vast knowledge of music. It's so cool to hear you talk.
just a blind monk stumbling into grace, man. The music. All right. That's what it's about, man.
All right.
Yeah. Be cool, brother. Talk to you
Right
soon,
on.
man. Yeah.
Okay, talk to you soon. Thanks again. Later.
Peace, man. Yeah.
Right on. Peace.